Welcome back to Murray's Minis, and today we are building my first diorama in 16 years. Over 2 years ago I bought this special edition Archaon model and pretty much butchered him to death, and this time I decided I was going to correct that error. I started with my incredibly precise and magnificent cutting machine. It's a pain in the arse. I would suggest getting a better one, but here we go. I work with what I've got. Cut myself out a block of blue foam, marked out where I wanted Archaon on the base roughly with my pencil, and just decided to cut a block out because what I really wanted with this was to have some movement, have him standing on a shore or a pier fighting off a bunch of crazed skeletons, because nothing says badass than fighting off the undead. So I tore into it with my knife, creating some nice rocky textures, really going to town on it, smashing into it and trying to get the right level, trying to get the right incline to make it look like these skeletons are having to struggle their way up to the shore in order to give chaos a good punch in the face. I marked out with my pencil roughly where I would want to be a drain or culvert to be coming out of the surface, so that way I maybe could do some splashing water effects if I fancied later on down the line after I had done all of the painting. Chucking holes into it, taking it bit by bit, marking out roughly, putting the two pieces back together and then just cutting a hole through it and ripping it apart. Trust me, playing with foam is a lot of fun if you just let go of your inhibitions and just tear into it like a crazed madman. It's a lot of fun. I do recommend. I took 5mm balsa wood. I pre-textured this with just a pen, and I later on was going to mark this with my steel wire brush. I super glued this wrong about 3 times. 3 times I got this wrong. No idea why. Brain wasn't working. As you can tell, I'm going to line this up. It's not going to be right, and then I'm going to have to do it again. No idea what was going on. Honestly, just was tired. Life is hard. But there, I digress. Let's make models and be happy. Now, this was going to be the basis of the pier. Now, I was in two minds as to whether or not to have Archaon standing on the pier itself, but this is a massive, chunky metal model, and chances are the balsa wood would not support him for very long, and the effect would eventually be ruined as soon as one of my children touched it with their greasy paws and broke it. So I decided to have him a little bit more recessed, and it would give a little bit more space for the skeletons to be approaching, and maybe have a couple more of them kind of charging forth and attacking on. I decided to use super glue to attach it to the wooden plinth and hot glue to the foam. I hadn't sealed down the foam and I wasn't actually planning on doing it this time. I ended up just using the hot glue to attach the wooden sticks to it. Also had to fill this out and create a roof, like a lid, on top of the drain coming forth, and I decided to break this up a little bit so that way it didn't look clean. I wanted all of the structures on this to look really dirtied and damaged, to make it look like it's chaos that is invading this city of the undead and they're just coming out of the sea trying to reclaim it. So I used some toothpicks, just push them down into the foam to create a drain, a sort of like a grated metal drain just there. I don't know if this detail is going to be that visible when it comes to the painting and when everything's done, but I thought it was cool. Why the hell not? Go for it. I cheated here and I used 2 leftover columns from my scratch build Dogal door set. If you want to watch that video and see how I built that, please click the link above to watch. I just took my cutters and ripped into these. This is high density foam, so you can absolutely get away with texturing this foam just using a pair of clippers, and it looks really good. As I said before, I wanted this to be a undead themed base. I didn't want any of the architecture to look nice and clean. I wanted everything to be battered and beaten to hell. I took some balsa wood. This is 1mm balsa wood, and just cut some strips, not trying to make them nice and even, and then mix them all up so that way there wasn't going to be any matching parts then. I wanted them to look a bit jagged, a bit mismatched, and just like it was thrown up and it was all rickety and about to come apart. Just slapped these down with a bit of super glue, made it nice and easy. I started to mark out roughly where I wanted Archaon to be. I did this several times throughout the build, and I changed my mind a couple of times depending on the details that I was putting onto the diorama itself. It's always a good idea to do this because you never know if you accidentally put something on it that completely ruins the pose that you was going to go for. I used my steel wire brush just to add some extra texture onto those wooden planks. This is one of those tools that you won't use all of the time, but it's really useful to have. I used it on some of the pillars as well. Bearing in mind this was going to be on a shoreline, I wanted to give the impression that there was a lot of water, stone, erosion and texture, and really to give it that sort of seaside shore kind of feel. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to give the video a like. This is a point where I decided I was going to fill all of the gaps and the edges with polyfiller, called spackle in the USA, and it's at this point which I developed a great appreciation for plasterers, because I was awful at this. I was absolutely terrible, and I don't know why I used a steel ruler. It was a really bad idea, and it did not come out smooth at all. I do not recommend this. Do not use a steel ruler in order to try and get a flat surface on the sides of your dioramas, because it doesn't work. It's a bad idea. I ended up finishing this off camera because I needed to have a serious crack at it. I used an old credit card and I cut off an edge to give a flat straight angles and used that to create the flat surface with the filler. I highly recommend using this instead of a metal ruler. I also textured the base with AK Interactive's rough ground texture mixed in with some bit of cut up cork. I glued down some rocks. I actually tasked my eldest child to find me sharp and jagged stone. She's a little bit too young to actually get involved with the painting and the modelling side of Warhammer, but she loves finding stones for me, and it's really useful and it really helps with these builds. She usually just comes home from school with pockets filled of stones going, "Are these useful?" And they are always. I stuck some wood down as well just to give the impression that the pier was beginning to fall apart and fall into the river. I started to glue down my skeletons. Now this was a lot of fun. It's an old kit, so there's a fair amount of cleanup work that is necessary to get them looking right. The flashing is really, really bad. But when you're cutting them up and you're trying to create interesting poses like this, it's a lot of fun because you're trying to do something a bit different than create a rank and file unit that are all going to stand nicely together. One of the things that was really important when it came to gluing these down and fitting them down was giving each one 3 points of contact. Just using the feet to glue them down is a recipe for disaster because they're just going to get knocked, bits are going to get chunked off of them, and it's going to be really, really painful. I decided to try and get as much of the bodies sort of crawling along the floor as I could. One was for stability. Two, it looks really cool to have them clambering onto the deck of this pier, kind of scurrying up these rocks, kind of pulling themselves up, trying to get toward this, vile Chaos Lord, and it just looks wicked. I had so much fun sticking these guys down, and I hate these skeleton kits. They are an absolute pain in the ass to build, to make, to paint. They're just one of those kits that are really, really annoying, but this time I had an absolute ball with them. They were really, really enjoyable to get these sort of strange poses, and I kept on getting Pirates of the Caribbean in my head where they're walking along the bottom of the ocean to get towards the Royal Navy ship and give the British an absolute kicking. That's just a fantastic image that I had in my head. I decided to put an LED light in it. So that will be part 2, will be the lighting episode where I put an LED light into it and I show you how to route out the base so there's enough room for the power supply and the button. And part 3 will be the painting of this ridiculous diorama that I'm really looking forward to getting finished and presenting to you guys. So I will catch you on the next one. If you want to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one, guys.